Hello, today we have a unique opportunity to chat with the master blender for Buffalo Trace, Drew Mayville. This is an exciting opportunity to be able to connect with one of the great good guys of American whiskey, formerly Canadian whiskey. You know, so much has changed. Drew's been with Buffalo Trace since 2004, and really that was an antecedent before American whiskey was building its foundation. But part of the reason why Buffalo Trace enjoys its distinct reputation is quality control, and this is a man who knows what he's doing. Before we get too started into this, I wanted to extend my deep appreciation to some of my favorite people. That includes Susanna, Grace, and Paul, and of course Nina, who've been countlessly helping me over the years and truly makes a difference in what Warehouse Liquors is. So we have an opportunity for the last drop. I believe this is a 28-year-old blend.
No, it's not. We do not age.
There's a number on it that says 28.
It's this 28th release.
Ah.
So Last Drop has been around for quite a few years, and this is the 28th release.
Ah.
We're over 30 now, so this is about a year and a half, 2 years old.
Have you been involved in most of the Last Drop?
No, not at the original inception. We just bought the company in 2016, and so they had history before that. It was.
I think I met Tom like 4 years before that.
Right. So that's his company, and basically we took over that Last Drop, and we've continued the tradition of making exceptional spirits with that company. So not only making, but curating, finding the rarest, most remarkable tasting products in the world.
It's quite a challenge.
It is a challenge these days.
Yeah, no, you should see my basement.
Maybe we should be looking in your basement, right?
Well, it's possible, but in this sort of it, I thought we'd start sort of at the beginning. And I was wondering...
That's a good place to start.
You've been in spirits for a long time. What brought you there from...
Chance.
Just as a job?
Yeah, because I never thought about a career starting out, but when I was looking for a job, there was two areas, well, one area really specifically is the alcohol industry, and in my area there was two plants. One was a beer company and one was a distillery. And I applied for both, and all I wanted to do is work in a laboratory. And so the distillery gave me the opportunity to do that. And that was a company called Seagram's back in Waterloo, Ontario. That was the original Seagram plant, established in 1857. So a lot of history, just like now with Buffalo Trace, with the tremendous amount of history. But there it was with Canadian whiskey. And Seagram was the largest distillery in the world, company. Today it's Diageo, but I worked for them. Moved my way up to become the master blender for Seagrams in North America.
So they also had a plant, I guess, in Indiana. Would you travel between the two?
Yes, sir. Did a lot.
So that was quite an exposure, because obviously Canadian styles and American styles were pretty varied.
Yeah, I would say there's not too many people who have my experience in both types of whiskeys. So I blend Canadian whiskeys and also work a lot with the bourbon products.
So initially your first love was Canadian whiskeys.
Initially.
How would that influence your interpretation of American whiskey?
Actually, the blending portion, because Canadian whiskeys obviously are blended, but so is bourbon, but people don't really talk about blending bourbon, because a lot of people would describe it as mingling the different barrels to give you the different products. But in essence, you can call it mingling, blending, whatever term you use. You are actually taking barrels from around the distillery, making a product so that it's consistent and matches the standard. So that influence from Canada, and to be honest with you, blending with Seagram was world class. There was nobody even close to it. We would even make part blends around Canada to make, say, products like Crown Royal and stuff like that. So one plant would issue a part blend for Crown Royal, and it would be shipped, and then they would move it around, and it would be phenomenal the amount of work that goes into blending. So they were the premier blenders at the time. And that influenced me, I think, in bourbon. But when I did go to Buffalo Trace, one challenge for me was there was a concept that I wasn't familiar with. It was called a single barrel. And that blew my mind, because in Seagrams you were trained to be consistent. So everything had to be the same. It had to taste the same, all the sensory properties. But when you go to single barrels, you go, well, it can be different. And that was difficult for me to grasp at the very beginning, but I soon grasped. And it was a nice challenge. And even today, to this day, training people to do that and allowing a leeway, plus or minus, of a single barrel is challenging for them to understand that and to get good at it.
In my view, I'd always felt that single barrels were somewhat straightforward. It's a bright star in the sky. You look up and it's shiny and you go, oh, there it is. There's another one, in that. But to be able to make your own constellation, blending, is extraordinary. Keeping the continuity with the varieties of flavors and having it come out in a consistent sense is remarkable talent. It's a cross between science and art, but
yes.
It's fairly daunting. On the few examples I've blended, describe it as backing your boat into a trailer into a driveway and keep turning the wrong way and missing it. But a blender seems to have the continuity that is extraordinary.
That's why it takes so long to blend. Sometimes it takes a while, because it's trial and error, right?
So, in this realm, what would be some of your favorite Canadian and American whiskeys?
Well, actually, probably the one that means the most to me is a product we make called Mr. Sam. And Mr. Sam is a tribute whiskey to Sam Bronfman, who owned the Seagram company. And we make it from Canadian and American whiskeys. So it's kind of like representing Seagram's the way it was, which I was part of. And then it also represents me, because being Canadian and American, it kind of represents me. So that was the one that means the most to me, because it represents me and my background.
When you had this project awarded to you, did you have a sense of flavor that you were going for, or did you have whiskeys picked out? How did you come about trying to honor somebody that was important to you?
Well, a lot of times you don't have the luxury of saying exactly what you want, and that's because you don't have the aged whiskeys to actually blend with. Sometimes you need to go and see what's available and then decide where you want to go with that, as opposed to, I want it to be like this. But the other inspiration was I wanted it to be in-your-face flavor, which it is, because it's uncut, unfiltered. And it kind of represents the personality of Sam Bronfman, who was pretty strong individual. And so to me, that was my inspiration in blending that one.
I see. Are there examples of things that never quite came to fruition? You couldn't quite get it right? Things that frustrated you?
Yeah, there's things that haven't panned out, but there's lots of things that have made actually make it worth it. But you're always disappointed because you can't get things off the ground. One thing that comes to mind is I always wanted to make a 6th antique collection. And I have lots of ideas. It could be blended even, but never has come to fruition yet. So
always been a fantasy for Rye Mash Bill 2 to take some form, be it a tribute to Elmer or
correct
Blanton's. And there's just so many iterations that would work.
And I thought about that.
And you could even do it something from A. Smith Bowman, which is.
Well, I thought about a world whiskey too, which maybe isn't in vogue or anything, but maybe in the future it would be. But it represents us, right?
Exactly so. That it's a company that's grown to be remarkably diverse, but even with essentially 4 recipes, it's remarkable, the range of possibilities.
Ooh, music to my ears.
But I still have some frustration where rye would have 2 spots in BTAC, and there's nothing in Rye Mash Bill 2, but I'm not alone in that frustration.
Well, that's kind of my thought process, but amongst others, I have many other ideas to do, but it hasn't come about yet, but everybody talks about it. You never know.
So tell me a little bit about The Last Drop. What was your goal when you were making this?
My goal, actually, it started out when I started at Buffalo Trace, and there was no goal in mind. Do you believe it? Actually, what I did is through the years have put whiskeys away that I thought I would use someday in such small quantities. So we actually took them out of barrels, put them in stainless, and I had an inventory of about 60 barrels. Before I knew someday as a blender I would use that. No, there was no purpose in that. Just did it because I thought someday I would use it other than that. And so the opportunity came up. We bought Last Drop. We acquired Last Drop Distillery. And the opportunity came up to make a product that would be basically rare, and it would be the last drop, because these are vintage components that I put away. So I had a pallet of about 60 whiskeys, and I used 14 of them to make the last drop. So these are individual whiskeys that will never be seen again, and then I blended it into this, so they're gone, most of those whiskeys, so you'll never be able to taste that again. So it is basically the last
How
drop.
did you edit from 60 to 14?
Well, I went through and I looked at what I wanted, and I picked those and I blended them.
Were you surprised, because you've been saving this for a long time, so when you come back to something that's inherently inert, but really there's nothing quite inert, so the whiskeys do change, as you change. Any whiskey on a given day will taste differently to you in that sense. So it must be filled with surprises and some frustration.
It is.
Did you get what you were hoping for?
Yes.
Did you exceed what you were hoping for?
I think it did exceed. At least it's what I hoped for and slightly exceeded. I see different nuances that I didn't see originally because it has changed, especially when you have headspace in it like that.
Yeah, conditioning of a bottle is fundamental.
Oh yeah, sure.
When I go to Buffalo Trace and I pick barrels, I'm going to taste something at least 5 times before I start making a discretionary decision. That's related to my wine background, simply because I want it to oxidize, in that realm. And the initial parts are that I'm picking the best whiskey, but I'm editing out the ones that are funky, musty, and moldy. I take out the ones that are bitter and tannic. The initial part of picking barrels isn't picking the best, but eliminating the flawed ones.
Yeah, you get rid of the negative.
And then you work with what's left. In my view, the best whiskeys are the biggest flavors that balance. But first as I describe it, I'm pretty good with delicious, but I'm really good with offensive. And so I'm working my way through that, in that. But you've got a 60.7 alcohol, an ideal mouth space to be at. And so there's so much dimensions. There's an unctuous richness to this. Overall, it's a nice combination of both rich and sweet that finishes spicy, but without wood being intrusive to it.
But that was the purpose of mixing the type of whiskeys I did, because I used a variety of different types of whiskeys from Buffalo Trace. So like you, I would do the best of the best and the worst of the worst. You take out the ones you don't want to use and you work with the best.
It's a great addition of spectacular whiskey. There's a difference between a song and a symphony, and it's the range of the flavors in this. It's constantly what I call a shape changer, because there's so much going on, and what you see at first comes back to you in another format each time. The mid palate is evolving. It's particularly interesting how the taste contrasts the finish, and the journey that you make through that. Spectacular whiskey is really an ideal interpretation of dimension that American whiskey can have.
Yeah, and I think over the years, blended whiskey, especially in the US, has really got a bad rap. And so I hope this is the beginning of the journey, along with a product like Mr. Sam, that changes that perception that blended is not good.
Blended is sort of an overlap of what Scotch had brought with it. At some point when you had vatted Scotch, it was considered cool and hip, but when you made a blend of malts from the same company or different companies, a blend may always seem to be somewhat inferior. I describe that as ignorance. The opportunity to learn a little bit further would make this less daunting and more open. It's kind of like making a very good sausage. You could hide a bunch of stuff through that when you're getting rid of the junk, but if you use the best possible ingredients, blending is an opportunity to really exceed any of the individual parts.
But you're right, not everybody realizes that. Actually, very few people realize that.
Well-
So that's the challenge for me, is to educate people, to show you how a blended product can taste, can be the best of the best.
If you do that one glass at a time, you will eventually understand. Thank you.